Hello everyone. So when I was first told that I'd be talking about role models, there were two prominent cliche speeches that came to my mind first. Option one, Mahatma Gandhi is a great man full of good qualities, selflessness, ambition, and a acute moral compass. We should all strive to be like him and follow other similar examples to better our society as a whole, and so we see ourselves more into our role models, becoming perhaps role models for others. Quite similar to the water cycle or the carbon cycle, this method is commonly taught at school and is called the role model cycle. And quite clearly you can see that apparently if you Google the role model cycle, an image of a person on a bicycle pops up, which I couldn't really use for this presentation, so I quite clearly sketched this myself. I apologize for my artistic talent, but this is just because I wanted to show you something, and it's that side effects include low self-esteem due to impossibly high expectations, as well as, in some cases, identity loss as a symbolic gesture, proving that we have succeeded in erasing ourselves and appearing in a really improved image, which is a way that we shouldn't really go through. Or option two, on the polar opposite, we shouldn't restrict ourselves and to all these amazing people in our vast world only to feel sorry. We should put an emphasis on who we are. Be your own role model. Now this argument is only slightly paradoxical since the dictionary definition of a role model is a person looked to by others as an example to be imitated, so you would basically be imitating yourself, but I guess you could imitate your better qualities, separating the wheat from the chaff, but to be honest, no one really knows what chaff is anyway. So in that case, all I can say is that, well, these are all great ideas with great points. And it's really better than trying to be unique and saying, oh yeah, well my role model is Ted Bundy because I appreciate his tenacity in the art of homicide. Instead, we should just demonstrate that sometimes the boring way is the way to go. I mean, Gandhi is a great man and he has amazing personality traits, but I challenge you to think differently. Instead of seeing your goal in mind, work your way backwards. You don't have to take a picture of a skinny model on the inside of your food cabinet to make yourself feel too guilty to eat anything. Though I'm not going to lie, that is a pretty clever life hack. You don't have to engage in introspection and realize that you don't like yourself enough to stay the same, therefore looking at people that seem perfect to desperately latch onto as role models. And lastly, you don't have to give up on that person, realizing that you can never truly be them. And then fake a smile with the tears of panic, decide that you do like yourself, but only because you saw a poster at school that said you can be your own role model. So now you do yoga and eat carrot sticks for lunch, because after remodeling your role into that of a role model, that's the image you end up with. But those images never last, and soon enough you're going to be taking that image of Veronica back onto your locker, and trust me, you're not going to eat carrot sticks over potato chips any day soon. So simply change the lens. The problem is that we see our role models in this glorified heavenly lighting, and whenever we notice something different about them that is something wrong, we tend to discard them and pick up new totems of inspiration, new role models. But if you would just change your lens and the way you see things, you might realize that everyone is imperfect. That's what humanity is. People make mistakes, and everybody has those days, and that's okay, because that's what it means to be human. And that's what it also means to be your own role model, recognizing your own flaws and seeing ways to change yourself and enhance your own talents and being unique. That's also what it means to admire someone else, respectfully wishing you could be more like them, because deep down you realize that they're probably just as messed up as you are. Which shouldn't make you discard them as imperfect role models, but instead fuel your own ambitions to be better, but forgiving of your own insecurities. Now, let me try to talk about this from my own personal perspective. So, people often choose role models based on societal norms. They choose people who are beautiful, strong, ambitious, passionate, kind, anything. But when I really started to think about it in depth, well, firstly I realized that I don't really think about role models that often. I don't look to others for inspiration. Now you might call me self-absorbed for that, but in reality, I guess I just never really had time to think about it. I just thought of myself and what I want to improve upon, and that was it. I didn't really look to others. So when I was given this talk to write about role models, it really made me think that, who do I admire? And the first person that came to mind was my own father. And this is basically the gist of my entire speech, because when I thought about my father and how other people might see him, I first thought of, oh well, he's pretty much your average guy. He goes to work, he's a businessman, he goes home after work, he has the occasional drink, he cares about his family. There's nothing more to it, basically, from other people's perspectives. The only thing slightly above average about him, probably if you walk down the street, is his height, which is maybe slightly above average. But otherwise, there's nothing really more you would notice. And that's because, well, you don't know him. You don't know his past. Because if you did, you'd know that when he was 9 years old, his father, my grandfather, committed suicide. And the thing is that that really changes you as a person. So his goal didn't become the new Gandhi or anything like that. Instead, it became becoming an average person. You just wanted to live a normal life. So after this happened, when my father was 9, he had a sister, and they were only 1 year apart, so they were extremely close. And I remember that they went down a rough path after this, because it was obviously quite impactful. My grandfather had been quite a complex character. He was a heavy drinker as well, and a beater, and he had like a Russian heritage, a communist Russian heritage. There was a lot to know. But after he passed away, he didn't even write a note. Or he did, but it didn't mention his son. So to that son, who was my father, that admired him, that was quite impactful. So he went down a rough path with his sister. There was substance abuse and abortion at 13 and fist fights. But he was able to climb out of that hole, and that's why I admire him. So he moved out of that small village, and he was able to find a safe path. He chose a safe path. He became an engineer, he found a wife, he had 2 kids, and by all means you would call him a happy and successful man. And his sister, my aunt, she also went down a pretty similar path, except that she stayed in that same small village. She found a husband, and she had 3 kids, my cousins, and it was all great. And I remember I loved going to their place because it was always so full of life, full of happiness. And I was too young to realize that people were talking about the empty bottles accumulating under her bed. And then when that artery popped in her brain and people they couldn't figure out how to help her fast enough, so then she passed away. And I remember I was too young to realize that then, but if I was a child and I could already feel a form of guilt over what I didn't do, I couldn't imagine what the closest person to her, my father, would have felt at that time. All I remember is the look in his eyes when we left the hospital, and it was so empty. He stared past me, and I remember thinking, will he ever come back to us? Will he ever get back past all this? Because he just looked so sad. But he did, and now he just laughs every day, and he's the one always making jokes. And I remember that even though he sometimes drowns the occasional light in alcohol, I don't really mind, because he cares so much about our family and cherishes us, and that's all I could ever ask for. I couldn't be prouder of him. Even though other people see him as that average man on the street, it doesn't matter, because I know, and I admire him. And that's enough for any of us. So just because someone seems average on the outside doesn't mean that they're not above average on the inside. Doesn't mean they're not role model material. So try to avoid focusing on the actions of your role models, but instead, as I mentioned earlier, work backwards. Dig deeper and find out why they are the way they are. Why do they deserve your respect? So, for example, if you admire a fitness expert and you want to be more like them, but you start from the shallow end, the top, and you start mimicking their actions, you start exercising more, you eat healthy, sure enough, that is a great thing, but you probably won't last. Because let's say you're the type of person that the word exercise and the word vegetable, they're not included in your archive that describes your own personality. So you're probably just going to end up thinking, well, they're up there, they're at the top of the hill, and I'm down here, so what's the point? But what you're forgetting is that they obviously had to walk up that hill to get there. So even though it was a treacherous journey, they are up there. So what you need to look to is their past, because sometimes you might think to yourself, oh, life is just going downhill from here. But that's because you're taking the easy way out, because if you think about it, walking uphill is much harder than walking downhill. So you can change your life around by just deciding, choose to take that harder path and walk uphill. So when you think about that, and you want to be healthy, just wonder and realize that they probably were somewhere else before they were where they are. What if that fitness expert was anorexic or severely obese before they became who you respect? So the next time you try to change yourself or try to become a better person, just think about that and let that strengthen your resolve. By thinking about the pain they must have gone through to get to where they are and changing their lifestyle. Because, I mean, I might admire my father's ability to stay positive all the time, but the thing is, I can't truly relate to him because I haven't experienced everything he has, thank goodness. He's still alive, I still have my sister. So I would never know how I would have acted in the way he would have, if I would have acted differently, if I would have behaved differently. Instead, I can just think about his smiling face whenever I'm feeling down, and just think to myself, if he can smile, so can I. In fact, there's something he used to always tell me, is that you are so, he means it well. He says, whenever I'm feeling down, that you are so insignificant in this gigantic world we live in, that nobody is going to care about the fact that you got a low grade in the previous exam. Because there are over 7 billion people out there, and if you think in terms of percentiles, you basically don't exist. And I don't mean to put you into an existential crisis right now. I just mean to say that it's okay to let things go and realize that you're not going to remember this in a while, because the world isn't, surprisingly enough, the world isn't revolving around you. So you need to make it revolve around you in your own mind. Because if you think about it, you're in this world, and there are over 7 billion people, those are just people. And then the world is revolving around the sun, which is revolving around a galaxy, which is revolving around a universe that is constantly expanding. So if that doesn't make you feel small, I don't know what does. But it doesn't matter, because you're you, and you're your own inspiration. So you can be your own role model. I challenge yourself, instead of trying to become your role model, try seeing them as your rival and accomplice. See them as someone who can challenge you to become better than you are, better than they are. Don't look up to them, but look to them as an example to just enhance yourself in your daily life. Because they're not necessarily above you. You don't have to rise up to meet them because you already are with them. And at some point you'll probably realize that you don't have to try so hard anymore. You don't have to be that person that everybody looks to and admires and sees as a role model. Because it all depends on what lens you're looking through and what situation they're in. So I can guarantee you that in someone else's eyes, you already are that person. Thank you.